Good evening, I'm Marchand MacDermotRoe reporting tonight for Infowars Nightly News. Tonight we're going to be covering a especially important story, the situation in Syria, ever evolving, ever changing. There was an article in PressTV released today. Syria says terrorist acts on rise despite Annan plan. Syria says terrorist acts committed by armed groups have increased over the past few days, despite reaching an understanding on a peace plan proposed by the UN Arab League envoy Kofi Annan. Damascus sent a message to the United Nations on Friday saying that terrorist acts are on the rise in the country, while the UN hopes a ceasefire will take effect next week. Well, here's hoping. You know, I don't put much hope personally in what's the efforts of the United Nations, unfortunately. But why is the violence escalating? Why is this becoming an issue? Well, one of the reasons is because it is become apparent that Assad's forces are winning. And it's something not mentioned very often in the U.S. media, in fact, not mentioned at all, to be fair, that Assad's troops have driven the rebels out of their strongholds. Why is this? Again, another point not mentioned very much in the Western media, but, however, mentioned in the Israeli intelligence newsletter, Debka. Debka report has talked about the shipment or deployment, I should say, of Russian SOBR units, SOBR units. They're the Russian elite counterterrorism police units who've seen action in Chechnya, South Ossetia, and the Caucasus regions, where the Russians have met stern resistance from Muslim resistance fighters who are fighting for their independence. So these elite veteran Russian troops were deployed several months ago to Damascus to help crack down on these rebels, or as the American press calls them, protesters. Again, a very ironic statement, I find. And additionally, a couple weeks ago, the Russians deployed several Marine units from the port of Tartus, from their aircraft carrier, the Admiral Kuznetsov. They also deployed a frigate to link up with the Admiral Kuznetsov and numerous other smaller ships to the region. And they've begun holding, according to Debka report, again, an article published 2 days ago, the Russians have also been conducting war games in the region. So they've made it clear to the Americans and to the Israelis that they are not going to allow Assad to fall. Also, the Russian foreign minister, Sergei Lavrov, said that Russia would stand by Iran and would not permit any further escalation of any further foreign intervention in the region. So what has been the American response to this? Well, the American response has been, we're going to pay these rebels. We are going to pay the so-called rebels. Russia Today also having a very interesting article saying that the rebels were in fact mercenaries hired from some of the infamous companies that worked for the United States in places like Iraq and Afghanistan, these veteran Rhodesian and South African mercenaries that we tend to like to work with from Blackwater, formerly Blackwater, and other such organizations, to commit acts of violence and terrorism inside Syria. So, where do we go from here? We're upping the ante. The Russians are upping the ante. Well, one thing I find interesting is that we have moved the U.S. According to a Stratfor report, the U.S.S Enterprise has been moved to the Mediterranean. Now, originally it was set for its deployment to the Persian Gulf. Ostensibly, I think, again, this is speculation, for actions against Iran. But what's important to note is that we and the Israelis have agreed to put off actions against Iran. We have agreed to not attack Iran. Now, part of that could be trying to lull the Iranians into a false sense of security. It appears to me, and appears to many other military analysts, that from a strategic perspective, we cannot fight a war against Iran with Syria to our back. Syria is a very strong military. They are supplied and equipped with the latest in Russian military technology. I'm talking S-300 surface-to-air missiles and Iskander or Alexander ballistic missiles capable of carrying and deploying chemical weapons. Whether they have them or not, who knows, but they have the capability is the important factor. They can strike anywhere in the region. So if we were to, and they are open allies of the Iranians and the Russians, so if we were to strike at Iran, we would be leaving a very strong enemy to our back, not only to mention that they also support, arm, and help equip and train Hezbollah. So it would be fighting a three-fronted war, which even as egotistical and arrogant as some of our military and civilian leaders may be, it is fundamentally impossible to fight a three-fronted war against three relatively strong armies with the small forces that both we and the Israelis have. So why is the Enterprise now, to go back around, why is the Enterprise in the Mediterranean? I think the American people need to prepare themselves for a Gulf of Tonkin-like scenario. This is the last deployment of the U.S.S Enterprise, and it is very important that it's being deployed to the coast of Syria and not to the Persian Gulf. I believe that what we are about to witness is an incident similar to the Gulf of Tonkin, or what was meant to happen to the U.S.S Liberty, but fortunately or unfortunately for the Israelis, the crew of the U.S.S Liberty survived. So I believe that we've realized that the only way to take out Assad is to invade. I believe that we have realized that we cannot take out Iran without taking out Syria first. Syria appears to me is going to be the flashpoint. This is what's coming next. It's going to be the flashpoint for World War III is no longer going to be Iran. It has to be Syria. The Russians have drawn a line in the sand. They saw Libya go. They saw many of their old allies go. Saddam, an old ally of the Russians, they saw him go. They realize now that if Syria falls, Iran falls, and Russia will be hemmed in. They've drawn the line in the sand, and they will not let us pass. If we take out Syria, if we attempt to take out Syria, this will be the beginning of World War III. And therefore, we should not be surprised if something happens to the U.S.S Enterprise while it is in the Mediterranean. For Infowars Nightly News, I'm Marchand MacDermotRoe. Thanks for watching. Have a good night.